All right, so just a couple of quick slides before we toss it over to Sharee. Welcome to our very first GiveCamp S'mores. So many of you may be familiar with GiveCamp, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is a new program from the same people that bring you GiveCamp every year. Just a little word about GiveCamp for those of you who aren't familiar with us. For the last 15-ish years, we've had an event every summer, usually in July, where we bring together 100, 150 volunteers who all work in tech or marketing, various skill sets, and we build technology solutions for nonprofits. So in the past 15 years, we've done 250 projects at least. We've had 1,000 volunteers. We've been running for 15 years. And every year, what we try to do is add up the value of what we've given to these nonprofits. And if you add it up over multiple years, it's about $7.2 million in value. So whether you're a nonprofit that's joining for some tech help, or whether you're a techie who is just interested in the topic tonight, keep in mind that our event this year is July 17th through 19th. So that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Applications for nonprofits will be opening in the spring. That's about as specific as I can get at this point in time, usually April-ish. But we'll let everyone know when applications are open, and hope that you apply to receive the gift of a technology solution. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Sharee Dorsey. She's going to be talking to us tonight about cybersecurity. So her talk is Defense on a Dime, Essential Cybersecurity Safeguards for Nonprofit Organizations. So Sharee is a cybersecurity specialist in her day job, who currently leads cybersecurity incident response, insider threat, and digital forensics for one of our Northeast Ohio hospitals. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen and turn it over to her.
Thank you, Shannon. Good evening, everybody. I will try to share here. Just give me 1 second. That's okay. I will go ahead and talk through what I have planned for everyone. The presentation is really just a bunch of words on the page and a couple of pictures. So I can go ahead and talk without it. I'm quite a gabber otherwise. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat and I'll answer them when we get to the end. Just because there are no slides, so no need to stop. I will say that I didn't intend for the presentation to go the full hour, so we do have enough time even with the hiccups here. Alrighty, thanks, Stuart. We'll go ahead and get started. So my path today that I wanted to talk about is one, why all of you have showed up this evening today, which is to talk about cybersecurity, and then a little bit about some of the common security threats that are out there that could be something that you've seen before in your own organizations, or at least heard in the news, but definitely something that you should stay apprised of in your environment. We'll talk about basic security essentials. We'll then go on to talking about passwords and authentication. Lastly, we'll end on artificial intelligence. I think everyone today is hearing AI. While everyone's excited about new technology, that technology still has flaws like anything else. So let's go ahead and talk about why cybersecurity matters, and that's kind of what brings you here today. So one, nonprofit organizations are often targeted due to limited IT budgets. While I'm in cybersecurity today, I started my career in philanthropy, and I remember back in the day, we never thought about security. We talked about technology problems all the time, but security was not something that was prevalent. Cybersecurity was not a profession that you can go in back in the day. I'm also dating myself here, but that's okay. And so from my experience, regardless of the size of your nonprofit organization that you're representing today, a lot of times there are limited IT budgets, which means there's no money for all of the fancy cybersecurity tools to protect your organization. You don't get the ability to, I would say upgrade your software in a reasonable time, right? So we have something called vulnerabilities that are out there, and that's a weakness in a system or a process or a flow. So you don't have the ability to update those vulnerabilities as they occur, and vulnerabilities pop up every single day. So those things often go unremediated. The other thing too regarding short budgets is limited training, right? So larger companies can invest lots of money into cybersecurity training for everyone that's employed, but not all nonprofits have the same budget, and training is often the thing that gets cut most because it's kind of a nice to have, not a must have, right? The other thing when it comes to having those limited budgets is people, right? If you have a organization where you are outsourcing your IT staff, you're probably paying for something very specific for them to do, right? And more than likely, security isn't one of their tasks, right? They're just trying to keep operations going for you, and you're typical IT person that you can call when things go awry, right? So that's another thing that happens with limited budgets. You don't get the people that you need to be able to support the infrastructure for technology operations. Next thing is, depending on the cause that your nonprofit supports, that may make you a target. Some people are just unhappy about everything in life. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter if you're supporting a cause that's for, saving animals in your neighborhood to curing cancer. It's going to offend somebody in some way. And just by having whatever cause you support, that may make you a target. So in my space in cybersecurity, we talk about bad actors. And so a lot of times, bad actors would use a lot of information and noise that's out there. Maybe there's someone that's been very vocal and complaining on social media about your organization. A bad actor would use that as a catalyst to then target your organization. The next thing is your data has value. I know a lot of times we're focusing on the causes that we are there to essentially support and raise money for. However, your data has value. You have a donor database, you have an employee database, right? You also have connections for your sponsors, and then also your suppliers. That's a lot of information. If you are a healthcare organization, you may have healthcare data, right? So talk about protected health information. All of that information is collected, and that is prime for the picking for our bad actors who are looking for data for financial gain, just because they're bored on a Tuesday. You may have heard in the news sometimes there's a 16-year-old kid that's involved in a huge hacking scheme. It's just because he could, right? He didn't have any end game there. But unfortunately, the flip side of that is the target then has to pony up money for remediation and things, right? So everything that you do, no matter how big or small, that data that you're collecting has a lot of value to other people. The other reason is also breaches, right? I think everyone, every day, there's another company, both large and small, that's getting hit. Nonprofits are not immune to this. There's quite a lot that's been in the news. I won't name drop these organizations, but they have very specific prominent causes across the United States, and they're often targeted. These breaches can lead to financial loss, right? So let's say your organization is on the smaller end and you don't have a lot of dollars and cents. Can you afford to not pay your staff for a month because you've had a significant breach? Can you afford to pay the fines that go with a significant breach, right? Can you afford to pay a lawyer to be able to help you through this time of need? Can you pay a forensics team, right? So there's a lot of costs associated with the breach. And, it's something that you want to never, ever, ever have to handle, but you need to have a plan for it, right? And the goal today is really to talk about basics that you can do that can help you, that isn't going to cost you $1 million, but will help make sure that you're not going to end up in a place that you don't want to be. The other thing is reputational damage, right? nonprofit organizations, for most of you, you're collecting money on a regular basis for annual campaigns, you're doing it for smaller fundraisers, everything in between, right? If we are trusting you with the money that we're donating and we're assuming that it's going to where it's supposed to go, and then you have a breach, what happens to that trust, right? With your donors, your partners, and even your staff, because you could totally lose employee data. That trust goes down and you lose your reputation in your local community. And then also if you are an organization that has like a bigger partner organization, right? That's not going to go well for the masses there. The next is compliant issues, right? So I talked a little bit about protected health information. That alone, right? HIPAA, huge problem, lots of fines, right? So that also goes back to the financial loss too, right? You're going to have to pony up money for those additional fines. And then now you're in hot water with regulatory bodies, right? You want to make sure that you're compliant at all times. Now you have a breach, you are no longer compliant. There's going to be a lot of extra things that you will need to do to get yourself out of hot water. So that's why cybersecurity matters. The next one is the risk of identity theft and fraud for donors, volunteers, and employees, right? So I talked about bad actors targeting you because your data has value, but then when they get that information, what happens to it, right? I think everyone on this call can attest to having some significant breach from an organization, whether indirectly to a company that you're familiar with, or maybe it was their third party, but we've all received at least one letter, if not multiple in their lives, that basically said, hey, we lost your data and we're going to give you a whole year of credit monitoring. Yay. You don't really get financial recovery from that, but that process will cost the organization, right? And when you're talking about identity theft and fraud with the data that you have for not only your volunteer database, right, your donor database and your employees, you're setting yourself up for multiple lawsuits there, right? Because of that breach that you've had and the loss of information. And now that data is being used in a malicious way. Lastly, your connections lead to bigger targets, right? So your organization may not be the fish that they were trying to fry. They may be trying to get somewhere else. So if you think about local celebrities, like our local anchors for the news, those are donors to a lot of organizations, right? You think of our local sports players, they also donate to local organizations, right? The target may be to get information about those individuals. And because you've now posted something in the press that so-and-so has given $2 million for the organization, right? That now makes you a target because they now know that this fancy pants person has given a lot of money. So let's find where that money is, right? So those are some of the reasons why cybersecurity matters to nonprofit organizations. And if it's not something that you've had a conversation about, I hope that as we go along our journey tonight, you think about the conversations you need to have tomorrow morning. So I want to talk about a few common security threats. So this is really for everybody. It's not unique to nonprofit organizations. So our first one is phishing attacks. A phishing attack is basically a deceptive email that is essentially trying to trick the end user into doing something, either giving a password, transferring money, escalating it to another person. So I know that people may be familiar with phishing. A lot of times too in the industry, we'll talk about business email compromise. Phishing attacks lead to business email compromise, right? I'll go back to phishing in just a little bit, but I'm going to move on to another one. So malware infections, I think everyone has heard viruses, worms, all these sorts of crazy things, but it doesn't have to be that big, right? Malicious software can lead to significant damage, not only just the systems, but they can also steal your information. I think a lot of people think like, oh, my computer has a virus, it's not going to work anymore, and it needs to be fixed. Well, on the surface level, that virus is there, but underneath, it's stealing your information that's on that device, right? So you want to be mindful of that. A lot of times it also leads to unauthorized access. And so you think of someone compromising your computer and you doing your banking on there. Well, we don't want the bad actors to get access to the banking information, right? So that's why we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves against malware. Social engineering attacks is another one. And so that is psychological manipulation to deceive somebody. So I mentioned it in phishing attacks, and that's why I said I'll go back to it in a second, right? The goal of the phishing message is to make you feel pressure that something is urgent, or that if you do, that's going to happen, or to make it seem like the thing that you're doing appears to be the right thing to do. Social engineering attacks are the same way. They basically target you based on your role, your position, your connections, and try to manipulate you to give out financial information, give information on other people, or even just to be able to compromise your account to get to where they want to go. Another one that I think nonprofit organizations don't ever hear about really is insider threats. I think we all can attest at some form of time in our working life in this industry that you've had people that weren't always good, right? And insider threats are really, and for the nonprofit lifestyle, can be staff, volunteers, any kind of additional workers. So we talked about outside IT staff. It's anyone that can be that can misuse their access intentionally or unintentionally, which can lead to harm, right? So someone nasty pretending to be something nice, right? A lot of times what we see of unintentional insider threat is, we have a person that was working here and they've been here for 20 years. They decided that all the work they've done at the organization, they want to pack up and take with them, right? So all of the templates, all of the donor list, all of the spreadsheets that were created, all of the budgeting information, they decide, yep, I'm going to take it with you. So that's unintentional insider threat, because that information should stay with the organization. It should not go with the person just because they're leaving the organization, right? It needs to be staying behind. It's protected information, it's sensitive information, and it should stay there. You also have people that kind of pretend to have your best interests at heart and that they want to be helpful. And then secretly, you'll find out on the back end that they had been paid to send certain pieces of information to another party. And ways you can kind of look at this is, maybe on Monday, Sally was very cheerful. And then, she was cheerful the rest of the week. Things are great. But next week, Sally's a little off, right? Something isn't right. And then you're noticing some mistakes at work. If you don't intervene when you see those things happening, that person may be struggling in their life. And those are the people that are prime for picking to get bribed to give you that information. And that's where you get those intentional insider threats. They want to cause harm. They want to protect themselves in some capacity. So they do whatever it takes for their own gain, whether it's financial or any other ways. Another one that nonprofit organizations don't really get educated on is domain hijacking, which I feel like this one is one of the ones that you should be aware of because it does happen quite regularly. So domain hijacking is basically when a bad actor changes your domain name. So domain name is basically the website that you use for your organization. So I'm going to use Google at google.com, right? That's the domain name there. So the bad actor has then changed that information without permission with the intent to either steal data, redirect traffic, or something else maliciously. And so you want to protect that information. What they're doing is going to the domain registry where you've signed up for your website name, and they're changing who the registrant is on that, right? And so you want to protect that from happening. You have to stay apprised of it. And I think that's something that nonprofits don't think about when they're thinking of their websites per se. And that's something you want to keep an eye on. The other part I will say regarding just website security in general is website spoofing. You know, let's say google.com was your nonprofit's standard domain website address. And then you will see someone pop up with a very similar name, but instead of O's for Google, they have zeros instead, right? So they're spoofing the original to kind of trick people to go to their site instead of yours, unfortunately. The next one is account takeover. So when we talked about all these other things before, phishing, malware infection, social engineering, insider threats, domain hijacking, all of those things are gateways to account takeover. And that's essentially when an unauthorized actor seizes control of any of your user accounts. It could be mail, it could be payroll, anything in between. And then they're taking the stolen information and using it, right? So essentially it boxes you out of being able to use those accounts. They have ownership of it. When they get this information, they will change the password immediately and they will lock you out of the account. That is kind of it happens in a matter of probably a minute and a half, right? It goes very quickly. We'll talk about passwords later, but that's one of the reasons why passwords matter. So I said after common security threats, we were going to talk about security essentials. So in my line of work, we talk about cyber hygiene, and that's basically the bare minimum best practices that you can do regardless of budget. There are ways to achieve it, right? And just good things that you should do for cyber hygiene. So think of it as washing your hands every day, right? We're definitely in peak season for colds and all sorts of nasty things. Think of all the things I'm going to mention as being a nasty thing, and you're going to protect yourself with good cyber hygiene. So the first thing we're going to talk about is something I mentioned previously, right? Which is updating your devices and software regularly. So we talked about how nonprofits don't always have the significant budget for IT, but what you can do is enable auto updates, right? You may not be able to get the shiny new software program that comes out, but you can update your version pretty quickly, right? I want you to start thinking about as soon as a new version comes out, you should be changing over to the new one. A lot of times what's happening is security updates are in the new software updates that are happening, and that will help protect you. If you go a very long time without updating that software, you're going to be behind and you're leaving your organization to be unprotected. The other thing are devices, right? So we all know that Windows has had about 50 different versions in our lifetime. We've had XP, 2007, we're on Windows 10 and 11 now. And there's been a lot in between those times. You do want to make sure you don't need to get it immediately, but if you're running Windows XP, that's very outdated software, right? And it is crucial to talk to your executive directors to get funding to be able to upgrade immediately to something modern. It doesn't have to be Windows 11, it could be Windows 10, but you need to get current to help protect yourself. The next thing is regarding limiting administrative access to your system. So I remember back in the day, you would have just one version of an application when I was in nonprofits. Again, I'm dating myself, but you'd have one version of an application and it had one login and it was admin, and then the password was admin123, right? That is a no-no. Don't do that. But when you have that kind of a situation, what happens is that you're leaving yourself open to attacks. It's easy to guess. You have shared accounts, right? If it's just admin, it's not tied to a person. So anyone's going to remember that password and you'll have that lingering in your environment. So remember when we talked about insider threats, having administrative access to the systems when they don't need it, that's a good gateway for insiders to attack, right? Because they know they have easy access to information. So figure out who you want to have your administrative users, so kind of your super users, if you will, and limit it, right? Not everyone needs to have the same access. So have that conversation if you have not already. The other thing, really basic cyber hygiene, is just using reputable antivirus tools. I won't name any particularly. I will say that some of them now come with the operating systems that you have, but definitely make sure that you're updating your antivirus, right? So when we're talking about malware infections, that's going to be the secret to helping prevent those. The next thing, which I haven't talked about, the basic cyber hygiene, is protecting that information that I said was valuable. So encrypt your donor database that's on the computer. So there's lots of ways to do it. If you are a Windows or a Mac user, each operating system comes with a particular program, so you can do that innately. You don't have to buy any new software, and you can protect that information so it does have a password and it's encrypted. What encryption does, it prevents people from getting to that data. And that's what the goal is here with cyber hygiene. The best thing you can do, because we talked about breaches earlier, right, is backing up your important information. It's one thing to get a compromise in any of these ways, but how do you recover from that, right? A lot of times, I find for nonprofit organizations, the recovery part is never talked about, and having great backups that are happening weekly is definitely going to help you. So you no longer have to have something in your organization to be able to do that. You can back it up to the cloud. The cloud is definitely a safe place to go as long as you are encrypting your data and using strong passwords and things of that nature, but it isn't option for you. What I don't want you to do is use USBs that you can pick up at CVS or ones that you get for free at events. Those things aren't going to protect you at all, and they get lost, they get stolen. You don't want that to happen. The other option is external hard drives. They now come with encryption built in and password protected. So really, really, really make sure you're backing up all the things that matter to your organization on a regular cadence and not just something you think about once a year. The next thing is we talked about training earlier, right? And not having budgets to train staff. While you don't need to have, fancy budgets and bells and whistles to train everyone on everything, I do think it's really important to talk about, understanding the risk to your organization when it comes to those phishing attacks and social engineering attacks. So just training staff and volunteers to recognize, suspicious calls, suspicious links and emails, and also weird attachments, right? If you're getting an attachment for something that you're not expecting, to make sure that they're really looking it over and not clicking on it and opening it up, and the next thing you know, you have a virus on your computer, right? So if it looks suspicious, make sure that you raise a red flag to someone in leadership. The next thing I want to talk about while we're on Google Meet here, that's caused me a few problems earlier today. I want to talk about communications, right? Most of the work that everyone's doing is literally digital, right? And so we're communicating not so much face to face. I sit on a board of a nonprofit organization that's local to Ohio, and our board meetings most of the time are virtual. And a lot of the work that's happening with meeting with donors, it happens to be virtual meetings. It's not so much in person anymore. And so protecting communications is really important. So good practice for just having video conference calls is making sure that you enable the meeting passwords, right? So when you only invite people to that meeting, there are other ones that are going to get the passwords. You're not going to be sharing that, and it's not going to be open for anyone to join your meeting when you're having it. So always enable a password for your video conferencing needs. The next thing is also, when it comes to communication, is verify the identity of the person that's calling or messaging you before you share sensitive information, right? So a lot of times we have these relationships in nonprofit organizations where your problem donors that are going to call all the time. That husband and wife couple that the wife will tell you one thing and the husband will call about something different and you're like, these two are not on the same page, right? Even though we know their voices and we know how they operate, it's still important to verify that information. I saw it at a nonprofit I worked at a long time ago where we received a request for a wire transfer of money. We don't really give money out in the nonprofit world. Like, we want to get money. And so one, it was odd, but then two, it looked like it came from a donor's business information or a business account, right? So it wasn't from their personal account. That was also suspicious, but then they also are a donor. So it was very confusing. So I've seen things happen where if we didn't catch something and verify identities, we could have made huge mistakes that would have been costly. Encryption. So I mentioned encrypting your backups and files and things of that nature. Again, I cannot express that enough, is if you are sending anything that is personal in nature about a donor, employee, or even sensitive financial data, or something in between, if you need to send that somewhere, even if it's to the person that should be receiving it, you should probably not do that using your personal mail. A lot of times, especially for smaller nonprofit organizations, it's so easy to use your personal account because maybe you were there and that's all you had before you went to a new modernized mail system, right? It's so easy to fall into that habit, and then people, making sure that you go ahead and protect that information and not use personal mail. So encrypt it, password protect it, whatever you need to do, but no personal mail with it. The other thing is password protected for files. If you have to share a file using a file sharing tool. So think about your big third-party file sharing tools that are out there, right? One happens to belong to Google, and there are some similars out there. One belongs to Microsoft, hint, hint, wink, wink. Those products allow you to password protect information and encrypt those files too. So don't neglect those tools and how helpful they can be for sharing information for you. I mentioned passwords a lot. I'll keep this brief because I have talked about it many, many times. So one, making sure that if you are going to use passwords, that they are really strong. So strong in nature is 12 characters or more of mixed characters. So upper, lower, numbers, symbols, things of that nature. The other thing you can do is what's called a passphrase. So my favorite color is blue. So I can make that as my passphrase. My favorite color is blue. And that would be long enough that will prevent a bad actor from cracking that information quickly. The one thing I also want to make sure that you remember, if you don't take anything else away with passwords, is password storage. No more Post-its, no more notepads, none of that anymore. Please use a password manager. There are free ones out there that your entire organization, regardless of how small or how large you are, can use for free. Take advantage of that and really store those passwords there. I have about 25 at work that I need to know. It's in a password manager. I have about 200 in my regular life, me. So between mail and other accounts and things of that nature, I have a lot of passwords. I can't remember that. If I tried to remember all these passwords, I would not have room for anything else. So remember password managers. Next thing really quickly is do not ever share your passwords. Even with your spouses, your kids, don't have shared passwords. Just get out of that behavior. I talked about that administrative password of admin and then admin123. That is not a safe and secure password, and it's something that you're going to share. You don't want to do that. There should be a password and a username assigned to every person. My last little bit about passwords is regarding authentication and multi-factor authentication. So if you don't know what that is, it is something that you know. So that would be a username and typical password, right? You need to also combine that with something that you have. So you may have received a text message from like your bank that's saying, hey, I want to verify it's you. Please put this code in the computer. That is another step, and we call that the combination of multi-factor authentication. It doesn't have to be something where you're receiving a code. It also can be using biometrics. So it can use your eyes that you can scan, a fingerprint that you can scan. Think of your cell phones, right? Most of them all have biometrics on there. So username, password, biometrics, username, password, a code of some sort. You can also do username, password, and then your location. So you would verify that you are in Cleveland, Ohio, when it prompts you. So making sure that you've turned that on. So my last little bit here as we wrap up is regarding the safe use of AI. I'm not going to do a deep dive into AI. I feel like I can talk about that for a long time, and we can keep that for another presentation. But just key things as nonprofits are starting to use it more and more. So if you have a Microsoft Office suite, whether it is Office 365 in a cloud, or even if you're using basic Office products, there is an automatic tool that comes with those products now. You can use that AI tool, but let's figure out how to use it safely. So one, don't enter sensitive information into any AI tools. Assume that it can be accessed by anybody. So, think of it as public access. You wouldn't put information, on the wall of a bathroom stall that you don't want anyone to have, right? Think of AI as that kind of process. You don't want to put things in that you don't want other people to have in there. So think of it as public. Anything you put in can be spit back out to some random person on the other side. The next thing is making sure that if you're going to use AI in your environment, that you're really transparent with your donors, sponsors, and anyone else that supports you. They definitely need to know if your AI tools that you're utilizing are influencing any kind of communications or even decisions that you're making. And that also goes for your board too, right? Also, make sure you're informing the board if you're using these tools, but then if the board is also making decisions based on the use of AI, they need to inform you as well. It goes both ways. The next thing with AI is any prompts can be saved. So again, treating everything as public, right? If you're going to type in, just like when you type your password, best practices to make sure that Google isn't storing that information when you're on a website. It's the same thing for the AI tool. You want to make sure that, whether it's accidental or intentional, that you're being very, very careful. You can reduce some of the exposure that you have by keeping AI's usage to minimal use and then intentional, right? Use it when you really, really, really want that information and you need that help and support. Don't try to use it for everything. It is not going to be that helpful for you, right? And so if you're not just dumping things into it all the time, you're going to be more cognizant and mindful about what you're putting in to those prompts or uploading even. And really, really, really important step. I know no one likes policies other than me. Develop some guidance for your organization on what's the safe usage for AI. What does that look like for our organization? Obviously we want to make sure that we're not putting financial data, donor data, et cetera in there. But what does safe usage looks like so that there's a list of guidelines that everyone can follow, right? So there's no deviations. And then lastly, I'm going to say, treat all the results that you're getting from these AI tools as a draft, and verify the accuracy before you decide to publish something publicly or even internal, right? Just make sure that you verify the accuracy of the information. There's a lot of bias with these AI tools. I will tell you a story. I wanted to submit something to social media. There's a joke of the day based off of a picture, right? And so I had a funny haha thing I wanted to send off for this joke, but I put it into an AI tool because I wanted to say, hey, how would somebody of this type of audience respond to this particular action? And it was quite offensive. So please be careful with what you're putting into the AI tools. And with that, it's time for a little dance break. We are all done, and I am ready for questions that you have. So again, this was an overview, not knowing the sizes of organizations. So this is the time to definitely ask anything that you had that you wanted to talk about, or something specific that your organization's doing and you just want a little clarity or guidance on. All right.
I can tell you that as you were talking, some of the people involved with GiveCamp, we were chatting on our Discord about things that we need to implement. So I think we're doing okay, but there's always more you can do, right?
Yes.
So definitely here.
I think the thing that stuck out the most was the password stuff. I don't think we're doing a great job at getting each our own account to things. We do a lot of like, here's our central account, and we put it in a password manager. So I guess we're following that best practice, but then like 6 people have access to that. And, it just, that definitely struck a nerve.
I know with software there's licensing issues, and so that can limit things.
Yes,
but
for sure.
Again, it's just making sure the right people have access. Even if you're a shop of 6 people, it doesn't mean all 6 of you need to have access to this particular application.
Mm-hmm. It's good advice.
Margaret, I think we could probably take some of these things that Sharee was talking about and maybe put together like a best practice guide that we hand out at GiveCamp. So like when you walk away from the event with your brand new website, some tips and tricks on how to, keep it secure after that, I think would be really awesome.
Yes, agreed. Another thing that stuck out was the domain
name. Yes, for domain hijacking.
Yes, domain hijacking. I couldn't come up with the second word. Is that something that a lot of, like, I forget, we're using Squarespace. Like, do they protect us against that? Or is there something extra that we should be doing to protect ourselves against that?
Yeah, so a lot of times what happens is you say, hey, I'm GiveCamp, right? And I want to own this name. No one else can touch it. There's paperwork that your organization is going to fill out, and you're also going to pay for the ownership of that. If you're using a website or a company that builds websites on your behalf, they may be doing that work for you. So it's worth just checking in to see what their process is and what security protections that they have to prevent this from happening.
Okay.
Domain spoofing you can't prevent, because I can spin up a website and it looks like GiveCamp tomorrow. That's something you can't prevent, but it's something that you need to be cognizant of, because I've also seen people who work for organizations that also went to the wrong website, and it's like, you should know your own, but they were spoofed themselves.
There's a lot of
this is Stuart.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
One thing I can tell you, I use DreamHost, and for my personal website, and I know that they actually have a part of their setup is they don't give away your private information. In other words, when you register a domain, you have to provide an email address and a contact person. DreamHost actually has a service where they actually hide that, so it's not out there publicly. So that's something just at least to inquire. Again, some of these services like Squarespace stuff, I don't know if they do that, but it would be something that you should be pushing them to provide for you. Another thing I want to share, when you talk about domain names, I know of a local theater nonprofit that changed their name, and immediately their own old name got stolen and became almost a spam site. And the trouble was that a lot of us have, like, I write blogs, so all my old blogs are linked to their old site. So if you ever do change your corporate identity on your website to change your domain name, it's worth paying for that old domain forever, because people will it will disappear within 10 minutes of you stop paying for it.
It's very fast.
And they either try to sell it back to you. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, I put a question in the chat. This is Carla. Trying turn my camera back on so I'm not like just a talking blob.
Also, Carla, thank you for mentioning TechSoup. Definitely look at the comments. TechSoup, I've heard about. BVU used to have a training for nonprofits, and TechSoup was one of the main resources they said nonprofits should go check out. So thank you, Carla, for sharing that. I just posted the Blue Sky, your suggestion, because I think people need to know about TechSoup. But anyway, go to your question.
Yeah, TechSoup has saved me so much money in keeping my software update with my nonprofit. You can get discounted software, cheaper licenses. I once upon a time got like 100 office seats. I don't even know what I would ever do with 100 office seats for like $50 off of TechSoup. So
yeah, they've been around for a long time, and they've definitely enabled a lot of nonprofit organizations.
My question though was, you mentioned making guidance on safe AI use, which is something we definitely don't have in our nonprofit. And I wondered if you had a resource for how to get started on writing that guidance. Like right now, my brain is kind of like the sky's the limit. Do I ask ChatGPT how to write safe guidance?
Yeah, so I do. So I'm going to send the slides to Shannon. I will also include some links regarding that too for you, Carla, specifically. But one of the ways to get started, honestly, is, do a trial and error of a couple of different AI tools that you think are going to enable your organization, right? Don't try to use everything under the sun. Figure out which one works best for you and your needs. They're not all the same. Some of them are quite silly in the responses that they give back to you. Some of them are more mature. Some of them can be very sassy pants in their responses back to you. So do trial and error first and figure out which tool is going to work best for your organization and your needs. And then next is regarding, basic security practices, right? So in my world in cybersecurity, there's always a policy called acceptable use. It usually tells you what you can and cannot do at the organization, right? You're basically going to create those essentials for AI. What can it be used for? Can it be used for creating marketing information? Probably, because it's going to be public anyway, right? Can it be used for manipulating financial data? That's not something you want out there, right? So definitely not. So, it doesn't have to be anything lengthy or big. It just has to make sense.
As materials are being developed, we sent out to everybody. If anyone comes across a policy around that, per Carla's question, that would be great. Because again, it's all new to us, this AI usage. So if there is such a thing as an internal policy that other nonprofits are using, or in any of your corporate partners, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to send some links to Shannon that she can get out to everybody.
All right. Any other questions? All right. I do have a couple more things. I'm going to put in the chat a couple links that I'm going to show you here in just a second once I get my stuff back working. Let's see. See if my share works now. All right, so thank you, Sharee. This was really great. Super excited to see the slides. Maybe my video editing will be sophisticated enough that I can layer them into the video. We'll see. Otherwise, we'll just attach them.
We'll work together. I can do some voiceovers for you if you need it. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon or evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I did want to let everyone know.
Thank you so much.
We have already scheduled our next session for GiveCamp S'mores. It's going to be a little bit different. It's a hands-on workshop on Canva design. So if you've ever wanted to create really fun social media posts or have some presentation templates or things like that, we will be actively working on those. So the link to register for that event is in the chat. We'll also send it out when we have the video completed of Sharee's presentation. We'll include links to next month as well. We need more speakers though. So we've got January and February covered. Still looking for someone to speak in March. You can scan this QR code. You can go to the link in the chat. There's lots of things on our wish list of topics to cover. So maybe it's accessibility or web analytics, or you're a whiz with WordPress and want to teach people some tips and tricks. There's lots of things that we know that we think could benefit nonprofits. So please, register to speak with us. And that is pretty much all I have today. Let's, in your reactions, can everybody give Sharee a nice reaction to thank her for speaking?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Ooh, they just keep coming.
Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome. And thank you for everyone that joined us. I know we got off to a rocky start, but I think we recovered really well, and we're used to doing that as nonprofits, right? When we
Resilience, that's the next topic.
So, all right. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.